No worries. So I'll jump right into it. So thank you all for joining. I'm Benjamin Rosenberg. I am the apprenticeship manager for the Colorado Apprenticeship Hub. What we do at the Colorado Apprenticeship Hub is we help the state of Colorado expand the number of apprenticeship programs available and expand or increase the number of people going into apprenticeship programs. Our goal is to have nearly every occupation be able to be apprenticeable and have apprenticeship standards, and therefore reduce the amount of people that have to go through 2 to 4 year colleges in order to get a decent job and have more opportunities for people to get good quality, decent paying jobs through going through an apprenticeship program instead. So I want to kind of go over like what exactly is an apprenticeship program, what are the definitions, and what are some of the things specific to making an apprenticeship program here in the state of Colorado. So again, feel free to stop me during this presentation and ask questions in context. We got quite a bit to go over today. Today, we'll be going over, again, some of the definitions of what are an apprenticeship and a pre-apprenticeship, the benefits of creating an apprenticeship program and why people go through the process of creating these programs, some of the myths around apprenticeship programs that people often hear that we would like to dispel. Also get really into like the core components, the models of apprenticeship programs, the roles of different actors within apprenticeship programs to create a really clear picture on exactly what these programs are and all the players involved, and then go over some common terms and definitions that you may hear as you talk about apprenticeships or learn more about apprenticeships, just so you kind of understand what's happening. So we're going to jump right into the definition. So first, we want to go over what exactly is a registered apprenticeship program. Well, a registered apprenticeship program is an industry-driven career pathway where employers can develop and prepare their future workforce. I'm going to pause right there because that's so important. Because when I say employers can develop and prepare their future workforce, one of the great things about an apprenticeship program is that the employer gets to decide what the standards of that program are and what will be taught. It's not, like what you normally get, which is where someone goes to school, they learn a lot of general knowledge about trying to break into an industry or get into something. Then they go to an employer and learn exactly what the employer needs. For an apprenticeship program, the employer decides what needs to be learned because the employer knows their own business needs the best, and the employer ultimately creates the program. And then for the individuals, it's an option to obtain a paid work experience and obtain a nationally recognized credential in an industry showing that they did in fact learn a series of skills that are going to make them very employable, and they got paid while they learned those skills. So unlike the traditional model of going to school where you have to pay a ton of money to learn the skills, in an apprenticeship model, an individual is paid while they are learning those skills. One thing you're also probably going to hear about a good bit in the apprenticeship world is high quality pre-apprenticeship programs, which are very important and closely connected with apprenticeship programs. So a high quality pre-apprenticeship program is a program that has a documented partnership with at least one apprenticeship program. So it's not just a program that kind of trains people generally in something. It is a program that is meant to help people who maybe don't have the base level skills and knowledge to join an apprenticeship program, gain those base level skills and knowledge, and then have a documented partnership with an actual apprenticeship program with the goal of teaching someone some skills, giving them the base level knowledge needed to be able to join an apprenticeship program, and then have a fair shot at getting into that apprenticeship program. So oftentimes when we have a pre-apprenticeship program, someone who goes through a pre-apprenticeship program, it will be automatically accepted into a registered apprenticeship program upon completing the pre-apprenticeship program, or they're at least guaranteed an interview with the apprenticeship program after completing the pre-apprenticeship program. So it really is something that someone who maybe doesn't have the skills necessary to try and join an apprenticeship program or apply for an apprenticeship program can join the pre-apprenticeship program, connected to the apprenticeship program they want, gain some skills that they need. And one thing that's part of a pre-apprenticeship program is that you must learn at least one industry recognized credential. That could be like an OSHA certification, food safety certification, driver's license, or whatever else is needed to get the entry-level credentials into a registered apprenticeship program, and then have that really fair shot. And ultimately, the goal of a pre-apprenticeship program is to really focus on people who are underrepresented or who have barriers to success, and help them overcome those barriers to success by putting them into a training program that's going to give them the entry-level credentials and a real good shot at joining an apprenticeship program where they can then gain new skills while getting paid to gain those new skills, helping overcome that barrier of having to pay for school and take time of not working to go to school, and making sure that those individuals who don't have that ability still have a pathway to get to these high quality apprenticeship programs. So that is what an apprenticeship program and a pre-apprenticeship program is. Any questions on that before I go on to the benefits of an apprenticeship program?
What's the difference between an internship and an apprenticeship?
That's such a great question. So one of the major differences between an internship and an apprenticeship program is, first, during an internship, you always heard of sometimes it's a paid internship, sometimes it's a unpaid internship. It can be either or. For an apprenticeship program, you must pay the employee. There is no such thing as an unpaid apprenticeship program unless it's an unregistered program. If it's a registered apprenticeship program, the employee must get paid. Additionally, during an internship program, there's kind of oftentimes those interns are in kind of a limbo status with their employee where they're not necessarily a full employee because it's more of a trial period. And if it doesn't work out, it's easier for the employer to offload that intern. Whereas with an apprenticeship, from day one, the moment you hire an apprentice, they are a full W-2 employee with the full protections of any other employee. There is no trial period, quote unquote, for an apprenticeship. Once you commit to hiring an apprentice, you are hiring a fully fledged employee that has full protections. Those are some of the key differences between an apprenticeship program and an internship program. Something else that I think is notable is that I'll get into this a little bit later as well, but with the apprenticeship program, you do have standards that you must teach. And so whoever is running the apprenticeship program must teach certain agreed upon standards. Whereas an internship, someone might be able to, the employer might be able to wake up that day and say, you know what? I was going to teach you this, but instead I'm going to teach you this because I need to do this kind of work and it's going to be a good opportunity for you to see me do this. In an apprenticeship program, you cannot do that. You have standards, and you must teach the standards in the way that you have developed them. So you can't skip around and hop around. It's kind of like going through an education program where you got to start at A and go all the way through Z, and you cannot skip any letters. We're going to jump into the benefits of joining an apprenticeship program, because one thing you might be asking is, all right, so an employer is taking on someone they don't know, hiring them knowing they don't have the skills to do the job with the goal of teaching them. So why would any employer want to do an apprenticeship program? Well, there really are quite a lot of benefits to the employers for the apprenticeship programs. The first and foremost is that we see consistently there's an increased employee retention as apprentices go through a registered apprenticeship program. The fact that the employer is taking on the time to train someone, pay them through the training, put them through some relatively extensive training, and give them a nationally recognized credential that they can carry with them to any other job afterwards is usually a much better onboarding and training model than sometimes what you see at employers who don't have something so robust. And, you may hear from many employees that they left an employer because they don't feel like they were properly trained. They didn't really know what they were doing. They were given like an unfair start to trying to join the company, with an apprenticeship program, it's a set standard that you're teaching. So employees feel much more cared for. And we often see a much higher level of retention for the employees who go through an apprenticeship program versus an employee who just gets hired onto a company. Additionally, it creates a stable and reliable talent pipeline. One thing with apprenticeship programs that's really notable, it's not really for a program that's a one-off hire. It's like, I might need, if you just need someone that's once every 3 to 4 years, maybe, apprenticeship programs probably is not the best model for your business. Whereas if you're a business where I constantly have a need for this position, I am constantly hiring for this position, I can't ever seem to get enough people into this position. When you create a registered apprenticeship program to help fill that pipeline, you end up with a much more consistent pipeline going to creating the talent you need, and that talent is getting retained. The training is customized and is tailored specifically to the employer needs. So one thing we hear from many employers is that, they get someone who came out of the college system. They have some of the skills they need, but not all of the skills. And they have to then start training someone who's already been partially trained. Well, with a registered apprenticeship program, you're customizing the training to the exact specific needs of that employer. And the employer is getting the exact talent that they need from day one. It provides leadership opportunities because one thing with apprenticeship programs is that you do have to have a mentor who's helping an apprentice go through, which often creates leadership opportunities for people who otherwise wouldn't have had a leadership opportunity because that wasn't available. You have the opportunity to make current employees mentors of new apprentices, which gives them the ability to show some leadership skills, kind of move themselves up, show what kind of leader they can be, which is also really good for the business when trying to decide who is going to be the next leader at the organization. Do we have internal talent? Well, if you have someone who's a great mentor, you're probably going to end up being a great manager as well. It can be used to enhance the skills of existing workers as well. So we often think of apprenticeship programs as an entry-level way into a business, but it doesn't have to be that. We have a whole set of apprenticeships called incumbent worker apprenticeships, which is where instead of it being an entry-level position where you get trained to do an entry-level job, it's actually for current employees to upskill themselves. So again, you can have someone who you have like this, bottom level staff, but you want more of those bottom level staff to gain a higher skill level. You can create an apprenticeship program within your organization where you take the top talent from the bottom, put them through an apprenticeship program, and give everyone a clear pathway to start moving up into your organization, which is where if you do well at the bottom, you will be joining an apprenticeship program where you will move up within the organization. And so you can use that to enhance the skills of existing workers instead of just getting simply new workers. Registered apprenticeship programs often have a safer workplace because, again, I mentioned mentors, but one of the things with apprenticeship programs is that all apprentices have a mentor, and that mentor is watching them do that work and is guiding them through that work. So you have that much safer environment with apprenticeships just because you know that someone who is properly trained is watching that new person constantly and is going through all the different tasks with them to make sure that they're getting trained in the exact way they need to be trained and all of the skills are being learned. It keeps employees up to date with industry trends, so you can customize your apprenticeship program as your needs change. So you can create an apprenticeship program that meets your initial needs. As business change and you need to update your apprenticeship program, you can easily update your apprenticeship program, update the standards, and making sure the new talent you have coming in and all your new employees coming in, plus existing employees, are getting that additional or getting that new information they need. So when you create an apprenticeship program, you're not stuck with what you initially created. You can update it anytime you need to meet the current industry needs. And last, it does increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We have found consistently that with apprenticeship programs, it opens up the door for many people who otherwise did not have chances to gain an education. Because one thing with going to school is that you have to have the ability to take on those loans. You have to have the time within your schedule to not be working instead. There's so many people out there who, due to various circumstances, can't afford not to work, and they often lose out of opportunities to gain a higher skill level and get a good job. Well, what an apprenticeship program can do is, again, pay people during the training process. So people who don't have time to not work can still join the training program and get the skills they need and get the education they need while getting what they need the most, which is the money to take care of their family or take care of whatever else they have going on. And as for the apprentice, well, first and foremost, they earn a paycheck while learning some new skills. That is, of course, an obvious reason why an apprentice would want to join a RAP. Instead of paying for school, you're getting paid to learn new skills. Who wouldn't want that? Additionally, with apprenticeship programs, you do receive wage increases. I'll go into this a little bit more later on, but part of an apprenticeship program in the state of Colorado is that you must have at least 3 wages. There's a beginning wage, which is what you make right off the bat. There's an interim wage, which is where as you are learning your skills and as you are learning to be more proficient at the job, you are required to have 1 interim wage during that apprenticeship program. And then there's a final wage, which is where once you finish the apprenticeship program, you have a much better skill set. You can meet the employer needs, and the employer is going to then pay you as a productive employee who can meet their needs. So instead of having to join a company and then try and work really hard, then use your salary negotiation skills to get a pay raise, if you join an apprenticeship program, you have 2 pay raises coming to you if you stay in that apprenticeship program, which again, it's a pretty good incentive. It's a great alternative to a 4-year degree. As we know, not everyone can go to college and get a 4-year degree. And in addition to that, sometimes college, college model and the classroom-based model doesn't work for people. People's minds work differently in so many different ways. And some people will do great in college, taking all those different courses all day. Some people don't do well, but if you put them in an apprenticeship program, they excel and they get everything they need. So it's a great alternative for people who otherwise may not do well in college. It's a great way to start a new career pathway. One thing you may hear from employees is that once they join an industry, they might feel a little stuck, like you can't really move around because it's so hard to join a new industry without having to go to school and pay money to go back to school, which you may not want to do. Whereas with an apprenticeship program, it makes it really easy for someone who wants to get out of their current industry and into a new industry to be able to get in without having to take on more student debt and take time off of work to go to school. So it makes it easy for employees to, in one industry, to say, I'm done with this industry, I'm ready for something new, and to join a new industry. There is a mentorship aspect. So all people who go through an apprenticeship program do have a set mentor where they can learn from it, that they know they have someone who they can ask questions with, they can talk things through with, they can talk about their struggles at work with in a safe way, because they have a mentor whose job is to train them and make sure they are ready. So you kind of have that built-in person to help get you through the work. It is a structured approach to job training. So again, when you sign an apprenticeship program, like I said, it's a structured training where you go from point A to point B, and you have to make sure you hit every stop along the way. So you are joining an apprenticeship program and a training program where you know exactly what you're going to learn and the way you're going to learn it. There's no surprises. There's no like, oh, you might have to do all these other things that the business might need you to do. You know exactly what you're going to be doing for the duration of your apprenticeship program. And last, when you join an apprenticeship program, you are eligible for supports and potential financial assistance through your local workforce center. So apprentices can go to the local workforce center and potentially get money for their apprenticeship program or get supportive services while they're going through that apprenticeship program. So that's a lot of the reasons why employers and job seekers choose to go to apprenticeship programs. There's a lot of benefits to it. In addition to that, 93% of apprentices retain their employment with their employer after completing their apprenticeship program. We find that when the employer took the time to properly train an employee and pay them through that training, you end up with a more loyal employee. And 93% of apprentices stay with their employer after completing an apprenticeship program. In addition, the average starting salary for apprentices after completing a program is $77,000 annually. That's across the nation. So you can see that apprenticeship programs are truly a great way to a high-paying, good quality job where you're not just going to end up, working minimum wage after an apprenticeship program, but you're going to make a good living wage that you can thrive on. Additionally, apprentices who complete an apprenticeship program earn around $30,000 more over the course of their career compared to people who do not go through any form of training program. So not only do you end up making a good amount of money after leaving an apprenticeship program, you make a lot more money over the course of your career compared to people who don't go to a training program. So there's a bunch of benefits to joining a registered apprenticeship program for both the employer and the job seeker. Any questions before I get into some of the myths about registered apprenticeship programs? Hearing none, we're going to jump right into the myths about some of the registered apprenticeship programs. So the first one that you might often hear when you start talking about apprenticeships, that apprenticeships must be 4 years long. They are a very long, extensive training program. That is not true at all. With traditional trades, such as plumbing and electricians, those programs typically are 3 to 4 years long because there's a lot of training that goes into working, adding electricity to a building and making sure it doesn't catch on fire or people don't get electrocuted. So it takes a while for those. But an apprenticeship program has a minimum length of 20,000 or 2,000 hours, which is 1 year. So an apprenticeship program at a minimum can be 1 year long. So an apprenticeship program is not automatically 4 years long or something super, super long. It can be as short as 1 year. One other thing that people often talk about with apprenticeship programs is that they're all union-based, which again is not true. That rumor kind of comes from the fact that apprenticeship programs are heavily concentrated in traditional trades where there are lots of unions, but there is absolutely no requirement at all that an apprenticeship program must run through a union. And in fact, we have many apprenticeship programs that are not union affiliated in various other sectors. Some other things that people often think of with apprenticeship programs is that they're only for construction industry and their traditional skilled trades like plumbing, pipe laying, electrician, carpentry, all those type of things. And that's where we see majority of the apprenticeship programs, but that's not true at all. One of the things that Colorado and my team have done is greatly expanded where apprenticeships are. And we have moved apprenticeships programs into healthcare, advanced manufacturing, IT, education, and business services. We have apprenticeship programs for teacher aides, medical assistants, LPNs. We have finance-related apprenticeship programs. We have drone pilot apprenticeship programs, cybersecurity apprenticeship programs. While a lot of apprenticeship programs are in trades, we have a growing body of apprenticeship programs that are in a bunch of other occupations. And one of our goals here in Colorado is to make as many occupations apprenticeable as possible, making as many apprenticeship programs in as many industries and as many occupations as possible. So over the next several years, you should continue to see that work expand. And last, one thing that you often hear about with apprenticeship programs is that they're paperwork heavy, and it does involve a lot of, government red tape and paperwork. But Colorado has done a fantastic job making sure that is not a barrier to apprentices. We have the Apprenticeship Colorado team who helps apprenticeship programs design and implement their program, and they provide lots of technical assistance, and they do a lot of the paperwork for the employers of those programs to make sure that it's easy for them. And then you have people like my team who spend a lot of time educating businesses on apprenticeship programs, telling them what to expect, telling them all the different things that they'll need to know about creating an apprenticeship program, and walk them through the process to make it easy. So those are some of the myths you'll hear about apprenticeship programs if you decide to start really looking into building an apprenticeship program, and know that often the myths you hear are not true, and that we have multiple teams here in Colorado that are designed to help businesses understand apprenticeship programs, get everything they need to successfully build an apprenticeship program without it being a paperwork nightmare. All right. So I've talked a lot about what is an apprenticeship program, the benefits, the myths. Let's go into what the core components, like the heart of an apprenticeship program. What is really an apprenticeship program? What makes it a unique thing that is separate from internships and all the other different work-based learning models that we have out there? So the 4 core components of an apprenticeship are: first is a paid job. Apprentices are paid employees. They are W-2 employees who have full employee protections. You're not hiring an intern. You're not hiring a temp. You are hiring a full-on employee. And that employee will receive a minimum of 1 interim wage progression during the apprenticeship program and have a final wage. So they get 2 different pay raises as they learn those skills and as they become more productive for the employer. So that's the first and foremost. It is a guaranteed paid job. Even though it's a training program, it is still a job. The second part of it is the on-the-job learning component. That makes it really unique from a lot of other different like work-based learning models or even education models, is that most of the learning done at an apprenticeship program is on the job. It's hands-on. You are actually working with an employer and doing something for an employer. And that's how you ultimately learn the skill set that you need to know. And there's a minimum of 2,000 hours or 1 year of on-the-job learning that must occur in an apprenticeship program. There is oftentimes and almost always a related instruction component to an apprenticeship program, which is where you would typically go through some sort of educational program, be it a classroom setting, like you're partnering with a community college and you're having your apprentices take some classes specific classes at a community college, or maybe an employer has their own internal related instruction program. Sometimes they contract with independent private schools to provide certain training and education, and it's recommended that there's about 144 hours a year of related instruction during an apprenticeship program. So again, most of the training is hands-on, but there's also typically some level of related instruction that is occurring as well, just to make sure that before you start, messing with wires or getting involved with food and the food safety issues, you're typically doing some sort of education beforehand to make sure you are ready to start doing the on-the-job learning. And last, and this is something that I think is really important and insightful and critical to apprenticeship programs, is that there is a mentorship aspect. Every apprentice who's going through an apprenticeship program must have a mentor. That is a trained expert who is very knowledgeable in the field that they're training in, and they're watching the employee throughout the entire on-the-job learning process. Every time the apprentice is going to do something and learn a new skill, they have a mentor right over their shoulder, making sure they're doing it right, making sure that everything's being done properly, and making sure that everything is safe. Those are the critical core components to an apprenticeship program. It is a paid job with lots of on-the-job learning, some related instruction, and a mentor is helping that apprentice throughout the entire on-the-job learning process. Any questions on the core components of an apprenticeship program? Hearing none, I'm going to go into the types of apprenticeship programs we have. So if you decide to create an apprenticeship program, it's not like you have to go through this like one specific way of doing it. There are some rules around apprenticeship programs, but there's different ways you can kind of set it up. There's three main models to a type of an apprenticeship program. First is a time-based model, which is where, let's say you're an auto mechanic and you're going to be, all right, we're going to do 20 hours of learning how to fix a brake, and then 40 hours of learning how to fix a transmission, and then 40 hours of fixing this next part of the car. And basically, it's done through the amount of time that an apprentice spends doing on-the-job learning. And that ultimately, all that time equals up to 2,000 hours. Sometimes USDOL will set a minimum number of hours for an on-the-job learning, depending on the occupation. That's particularly true for construction occupations or anything that's considered a hazardous occupation. The U.S. Department of Labor might have certain minimum hours that they have to do on-the-job learning with a mentor in order to be able to say that they're competent in that. But that is one model where it's the amount of time you spend doing something. The other model that you will often see is a competency model, where it's not about how many hours you spend doing something. It's about, did you learn that skill set, and are you ready to move on to learning the next skill set? So sticking with that auto mechanic thing I was talking about, a competency-based model might look like, we're going to first learn how to fix brakes. And once you learn how to properly fix brakes, then I'm going to teach you how to fix a transmission. But I'm not going to even bother with transmission until you
for 255.
You won't even bother with learning how to build a transmission until you learn how to fix the brake. And so we do often see occupations outside of the trades use a competency-based model. Most traditional trades will use a time-based model. A lot of the other apprenticeship programs outside of the traditional trades will use a competency-based. And then there is a hybrid, which is where you can use a combination of time-based and competency-based. Sticking with that auto mechanic model, they say, brakes are brakes. Brakes aren't that complicated. So we're going to do 20 hours of learning how to fix a brake, but a transmission, that's really complicated. That's really difficult. So we're going to do a competency-based model for when you're learning how to build or learning how to fix a transmission. But brakes, they're less complicated. They're not as big of a deal. So we're only going to do a time-based, and you can kind of have a combination of both. But as you're developing an apprenticeship program, you're going to have to go with one of these three models. So when you're thinking about that structured on-the-job learning, it's either time-based, where it's where you do certain tasks for a certain amount of time, where it's competency-based, which is where you cannot move to the next part of the apprenticeship program until you can show that you are competent in the previous part that you were trying to learn. And there are 4 key roles within an apprenticeship program that you're going to hear a lot. 3 of these roles are the absolute most critical, and there's another one, but we're going to go over all 4. The 3 most critical components and roles within any apprenticeship program is, first, an employer. There has to be an employer attached to an apprenticeship program who is doing the on-the-job training. The employer is the one responsible for doing the on-the-job training or on-the-job learning. So, as a result, the employer ultimately drives the program. The employer is often the one who helps design the program, says, these are my business needs, this is what I need taught. And then they actually take on that apprentice and do all the on-the-job training with them. There is a sponsor who is responsible for registering and administering an apprenticeship program. That can be an employer, it can be a union, it can be a training provider, it can be a whole bunch of different entities. In fact, there are entities who are called intermediaries whose whole job is to just simply be a sponsor. I'll go into that a little bit later, but the sponsor is responsible for what I like to call a lot of the HR functions of an apprenticeship program. They make sure that the program is registered. They make sure that the apprentices that they hired are registered with the RAPIDS program. They make sure that anti-harassment trainings are happening, and they make sure that there's appropriate mentorship ratios. They collect the documentation that shows that the amount of time spent or the competencies of the apprenticeship program are being met. And in the event of an audit, whoever is a sponsor of a program is responsible for going through the audit. So they do a lot of those kind of HR functions of an apprenticeship program. And the third most critical part of an apprenticeship program is the related instruction provider, who again is providing some education base. So often that education base is meant to complement the on-the-job learning. So they might go over some food safety techniques before you get into a kitchen and start actually doing the on-the-job learning in the kitchen. The related instruction provider might provide some basic food safety education courses beforehand or something like that. And that related instruction provider can be a whole bunch of different organizations. It can be a community college, university, it can be a labor union, it can be the employer themselves, it can be a whole bunch of different entities. But for the most part, if you have an employer, a sponsor, and a related instruction provider, you can build an apprenticeship program. If you're missing one of those three components, you really don't have an apprenticeship program. The fourth key role within an apprenticeship program is supportive services. And it is really important to mention because as someone is going through an apprenticeship program, they're not paid their final wage. They're paid more like they're in training and they're not necessarily productive for that employer yet, and they're learning to become productive. So typically entry and interim wages for an apprenticeship program are a bit lower. Which again, if you're thinking about the fact that you're training an employee, that kind of makes sense. However, that can put the apprentice themselves in some precarious situations. So it is important to think about how are you going to take care of your apprentices if they're not getting paid their higher end wage yet. And that's where most apprenticeship programs will connect with workforce services or nonprofit organizations to ensure that their apprentices are getting the services they need in order to be successful in that apprenticeship program. We find that apprenticeship programs who connect with workforce centers or nonprofit centers often have their apprentices retain and complete the apprenticeship program because to reduce the amount of housing insecurity, food insecurity, childcare insecurity, and those type of things by connecting those apprenticeships to nonprofit organizations while they're going through that apprenticeship program. So let's start breaking some of this down because these are a lot of terms: employer, sponsor, related instruction provider. Let's really start breaking these down and exactly who does what and how they fit into the four key components of four key roles of a registered apprenticeship program. So first, the sponsor. The sponsor has an absolutely critical role to all things related to apprenticeships. First and foremost, the sponsor registers the apprenticeship program with either the U.S. Department of Labor, or if you're in a state apprenticeship agency state, which Colorado is, they will register the program with the state apprenticeship agency. They will then in turn develop, update, and maintain the standards of the apprenticeship program. They're also going to maintain the records that shows that the apprentices are moving forward with the apprenticeship program. They're going to show that if it's a time-based model, that the amount of time spent learning a certain thing was in fact met. If it's a competency-based model, they're going to make sure that the documentation that shows that a person did in fact become competent in something before moving on to the next part in the apprenticeship was met, and they have all that documentation necessary. And then they're taking all that documentation showing that the competencies are being met and taught, and it uploads them into a RAPIDS system. The RAPIDS system is a federal database of all apprentices who join in a registered apprenticeship program, and any registered apprenticeship program must enter all of their apprentices into a RAPIDS database and must upload all the competencies and the nationally recognized credential at the end of the program into RAPIDS. And the sponsor is responsible for making sure that all that information is entered into the RAPIDS database. Additionally, the sponsor will develop and maintain affirmative action plans. They will ensure a safe working environment and provide anti-harassment trainings. And they will also be the ones who prepare and participate in any USDOL or state apprenticeship agency audits. So again, when I say that a sponsor is kind of like an HR function, they're the ones who are doing all the required data entry for apprentices. They're the ones who are developing, updating, and maintaining standards. They're collecting all the documentation showing that the apprentices are being taught what they're supposed to be taught. They're making sure that during an audit, all the information is available for review and going over it. So this is why sometimes the business is the sponsor for a program, but sometimes the business might not want to take all of that on and will find someone else to be a sponsor, some sort of intermediary or school, labor union, or something along those lines to take care of all of those requirements. So when it comes to sponsorship, you can have a multi-employer sponsorship program, or you can have a single employer sponsorship program. For this multi-employer sponsorship program, this is typically where you're going to hear things like intermediaries, or which are intermediaries are companies whose sole job is to be sponsors for employers. And they will often have national programs or massive programs expanding statewide or across state lines. And what those multi-employer sponsorships do is that there's one entity who takes care of all of the sponsorship stuff, and all the employer has to worry about is completing the on-the-job learning and submitting the documentation of the on-the-job learning to the sponsor, and the sponsor takes care of everything else. So the benefit is that it takes off that administrative burden from employers to run those sponsorship parts of the program. And they also oftentimes will unify program design. So when you start dealing with national programs or multi-employer programs, the sponsor doesn't want like 15 different totally unique programs. Or typically, if they have a healthcare sponsor, all of the employers who are on there are going to have the same standards for every medical assistant program that they have for the most part. So they kind of help unify the standards, which some employers might really want. They might want to make sure that, that what an employee is being taught is consistent with industry standards, and a multi-employer sponsor will help make sure that the things being taught in an apprenticeship program are in fact the industry standard, and that numerous employers are accepting people with those credentials. And so if anyone is interested in a multi-employer sponsorship, you can reach out to my agency, the Colorado Apprenticeship Hub, and we can tell you of any sponsors that we know of. And if we do know of any multi-employer sponsors, we can help you get connected with those. Whereas a single employer sponsor is a bit decentralized. So this is where an employer is their own sponsor. The employer takes on all the responsibilities of a sponsorship, or of the sponsorship, and in turn, they get to make sure the program is truly uniquely tailored to their specific needs. You're not having some multi-employer sponsor who's like, this is how we run our medical assistance program. These are the standards of our medical assistants. This is what we're going to give you if you join our program. Instead, the employer says, no, I want very, very specific things from my medical assistants, and I don't want your standards. I want my own standards. And in turn, I'm going to be a sponsor for my own program to make sure that happens. And the employer ultimately gains complete control and design of those programs. We at the Colorado Apprenticeship Hub can help people join multi-employer sponsorship programs or understand the nitty-gritty requirements of being a single employer sponsor. But those are kind of the two models for sponsorships. It's either you kind of have a big sponsor who has set standards and you agree to join the standards, or you say, nope, I want my own truly unique program. I'm not going to bother with your standards. I want to make my own standards. And in turn, I'm going to take on the responsibility of being a sponsor. For the on-the-job learning, some things to requirements and considerations. First, again, a minimum of 2,000 hours for 1 year. You cannot have anything less than that. If you're trying to create an apprenticeship program that has less than 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning, you're not going to be able to create that program. Your program must have at least 2,000 hours. Most occupations are competency-based for the on-the-job learning, whereas the skilled trades typically will go to time-based or some sort of hybrid. That on-the-job training is structured. It is not loosey-goosey. You don't get to decide morning of what you're going to do. It is this is the structure of the on-the-job training, and you have to follow that structure. The employer gets to determine the on-the-job learning competencies and what's going to be taught with the on-the-job learning competencies. And if an employer wants to know, well, what exactly does that look like? I just want to know more about what these competencies are. I want to see some examples. The Colorado Apprenticeship Hub and Apprenticeship Colorado would be more than happy to provide samples of competencies for an occupation that someone is looking at, to give employers a real thing to look at that says, oh, this is what's being asked of me. I now have a much better understanding of what it means to develop on-the-job competencies, or on-the-job learning competencies. Additionally, with on-the-job learning, I've mentioned this before, but there is a mentor to journey worker ratio that must be met. So an employer must make sure that they have a mentor for every apprentice that they hire. Now, the default ratio for mentor to apprentice is 1-to-1. However, for non-hazardous occupations, that can be expanded. So even though the default ratio is 1-to-1, if you're working in a non-hazardous occupation, you can definitely look at having that be a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, or wherever else based on business needs. The only thing you have to ensure is safety in that regard. So sometimes that's a pretty easy thing when it comes to safety to have that expanded ratio. But as I mentioned, that's only for non-hazardous occupations. If you're trying to develop something as a hazardous occupation, such as like working with heavy equipment and machinery, is a required 1-to-1 ratio for safety reasons. And last, during the on-the-job training, an apprentice will be paid for the on-the-job training. They must get paid for the on-the-job training. You cannot get around that requirement. Again, these apprentices are W-2 employees. They are paid employees. They have full protections of all the other employees. So an apprentice will get paid for the on-the-job learning. When it comes to the related instruction part of it, it is recommended that there's 144 hours of related instruction per year that can be online, in person, or hybrid, and it's typically delivered internally by the employer or some sort of post-secondary education or even online courses from private education providers. And an employer can leverage existing internal training as part of their related instruction. And it's very common that people want some level of related instruction. Again, think about if you're trying to run a restaurant-based apprenticeship program to be like, a kitchen manager, you want to make sure that they go over some food safety instruction courses before you throw them into a kitchen. And that's where that related instruction can be really critical and important to an apprenticeship program. So before they go to the on-the-job learning process, they have some level of base knowledge before they get into it. Now, I'm going to skip a few slides here just because I want to make sure I go over some other important things. I don't want to get too caught in the weeds on some stuff. So one thing to know is that when you're going through an apprenticeship program or thinking about developing an apprenticeship program and looking into it, you might hear Office of Apprenticeship States and state apprenticeship agencies. The difference is that at an Office of Apprenticeship State, the federal government has an office within that state that is responsible for developing, registering, and doing quality assurance over all apprenticeship programs within the state. Whereas if you're a state apprenticeship agency, instead of having a federal government office do that, the state makes an office, and that office run by the state is responsible for developing and maintaining the standards for apprenticeship programs, as well as doing quality assurance on all of those programs within the state. You'll see that Colorado is not listed as an SAA state in this photo, and it needs to be updated because as of July 1st, 2023, a few months ago, Colorado became an SAA state. So we now have the Colorado's SAA, which is called Apprenticeship Colorado, and that agency is responsible for registering all apprenticeship programs in the state, doing quality assurance of those programs, doing some promotion of apprenticeships, and ultimately providing technical assistance to all registered apprenticeship programs or people who are trying to register an apprenticeship program. They are ultimately a regulatory body for all things apprenticeship in the state of Colorado. So we just began Colorado's SAA. They have hit the ground running. I work very closely with everyone at Apprenticeship Colorado. They are really wonderful and knowledgeable. I am very impressed with everything I've seen from Colorado's SAA, Apprenticeship Colorado. They really work hard to make sure that employers get what they want from apprenticeship programs. They really work hard to make sure things are customizable and unique and are meeting the needs of employers. And they're also really great at helping people who are outside of an industry where you typically see apprenticeship programs and help them develop some of the first apprenticeship programs within their industry. Some other things, I'm going to jump to some key definitions. And again, when you get into the world of apprenticeships, you're going to hear some key definitions that I just want to go ahead and talk to you guys about so you have some understanding of what's going on. So one thing you might hear about when you talk about designing and developing an apprenticeship program is apprenticeable occupation. So the United States Department of Labor has a list of pre-approved occupations, sometimes called the apprenticeable occupations, that they say, oh, yes, this occupation can be made into an apprenticeship program. That is often what is referred to as an apprenticeable occupation. One thing that the SAA here in Colorado, Apprenticeship Colorado, has been really good about is expanding the list of apprenticeable occupations outside of what USDOL has. USDOL, of course, is a bit slower when it comes to that stuff, where having an SAA state like Colorado, it allows us to be more innovative when we're working with our employers. And we can oftentimes find ways to make an apprenticeable occupation before the federal government does. And the federal government kind of has to catch up to the SAA state. You will hear another term, apprenticeship agreement, or the ETA 671. That is just a written agreement between an apprentice and the program they are joining that outlines the agreement between the apprentice and the employer. It outlines the competencies that are going to be taught and guarantees that, the apprentice knows the competencies being taught and the employer agrees to teach those competencies. And also it goes over like wage progressions, what they're going to be paid and when they get their wage increases, and the employees signing off saying, yes, I understand that I'm starting at this, my interim wage will be earned at this point, and upon completing an apprenticeship program, I will have this final wage. So it's just an employee contract. You will hear something called apprenticeship standards. And that is just basically the document that describes how the program will be managed. It says you're going to start by teaching the person this thing, and you're going to teach all these other things along the way. And then by the time you finish teaching all of those things, you finish the apprenticeship program and the person is properly trained. So an apprenticeship standard is really just what you'll hear about when you talk about actually creating a program and what's going to be taught during those programs. So those were some of the key terms and definitions. I don't think the next ones are super important because now that they used to be super important when we were not an SAA state. But now that we are an SAA state, some of the national stuff doesn't quite apply to us anymore. So I tried cutting some of that to give a little bit of time for questions. So for anyone who is here, now is a great time for questions. So I haven't checked the chat. Are there any questions in the chat?
Yeah, I think then people are looking maybe for a link for more information. If you could drop that in there, I think that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of really good information. And again, for everybody, this is recorded. So you will be able to have it if you were able to attend or you want to share. And if you've got a question, we can take a question. Otherwise, we're going to kind of step back and get ready for our next session. It'll start here in about 8 minutes. I
have a quick question. So with all of these different pieces, I work with small business operations, especially skilled trades and services, specifically in helping people get from 1 person to 5 people, right? And so I hear a lot of small business owners who say, yeah, I'd really like to start an apprenticeship program. The bureaucratic burden on that is massive. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to find, I don't know what these terms mean. I don't know what things so where is the spot where they can go and look at who might be the regulatory agency or the partner or the sponsoring organization? Is there a list of those that I can point them to, or a connection point within the state that somebody can go and say, okay, here's my starting point for someone who already knows what's up?
Yes. And that's so I put my email address as well as a link to our page for Arapahoe Douglas Works that has my email address. That's exactly what my team does. That is the purpose of pretty much why my team exists. We are the single point of contact for all questions related to apprenticeships here in Colorado. And we can go anywhere from this RAP 101 training session that we just did and provide that information all the way to much more complex, hyper-specific questions that businesses will have. And what we do is that we walk a business through all the nitty-gritties that they might need to know when developing an apprenticeship program. And then if the employer says, you know what, this is right for me, I think I'm ready, we are going to be the ones to connect them with Apprenticeship Colorado, the Colorado State Apprenticeship Agency, to start the development process. So we are that single point of contact for all employers in the state. I'm incredibly impressed with my team. I really am so proud of the team that I have. Before we were doing our current role, we were, and before the State Apprenticeship Agency was official, we were actually developing standards with employers. So my team not only has experience just talking about apprenticeship programs, but actually has experience in developing standards with employers. So they really understand that process in depth as well. We're able to really, as a result, answer that really specific nitty-gritty questions that employers have. So I would say, and I'm willing to share this PowerPoint afterwards, and I know that's a link where I can upload it, and I plan on sharing this PowerPoint afterwards because it's a lot of information. But honestly, sometimes the best thing to do is get them connected with my team and set up some of those meetings where employers can ask those hyper-specific questions to their needs.
You've got great questions. Ben, that was a great presentation. You've got your contact information in the chat for anybody who needs it. I am GBC staff, so I will be here.
Thank you so much for your time, Dale.
You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.